So today we have to talk about America and the war. So get out your notes. This is note time. You know where paper is. You should be taking notes. You should be taking notes. You should be taking notes. You should at least fake that you're taking notes. All right. So the president at this time is Woodrow Wilson. He's a progressive. He believes in changing things so it's better to protect the people. Well, everyone dies, but he's a progressive. He's a college professor before the presidency, he would actually be president of Princeton University. Extremely intelligent man. Racist man, but intelligent. Yeah, no, he's pretty darn racist. Like, he sets things back quite a bit. So talking too nicely about him is not really a good thing. Smart, racist. Woodrow Wilson has plenty of pitfalls. Not someone you talk too highly about. Now, we mentioned Woodrow Wilson briefly. He wins the presidency whenever Teddy Roosevelt runs for a third term as a third party and splits the ticket between him and William Howard Taft. So Woodrow Wilson wins with 40-some% of the vote. And he runs for his second term with the slogan, "He kept us out of war." America does not want to get dragged into Europe's mess. That's why he won. He kept saying that everyone said he kept us out of war. He did what he promised. He said we're not going to go to war, and we didn't. Now, during this time, the Germans are using submarines a lot. They have fully committed to this idea. And they call it unrestricted submarine warfare. They are no longer worried about trying to look nice and stop civilian ships and say that they're doing the right thing. They're like, no, if it could go to England and help England win the war, we are sinking it. Meanwhile, the U.S. is in it for the money. We will sell to whoever will pay us. Now, we're mostly helping Britain. About 90% Britain. But when Germany wants to pay enough, we'll give it to them too. Officially, we're neutral. We're doing it for the cash market. That's right. So putting that idea in notes, yeah, we are supporting Britain. Officially, we're neutral, but we have which one we want to win. And we're mostly selling to them. We are telling the Germans, do not sink U.S. ships, or you will have issues. And in January 1917, Germany's basically telling us, look, stay out of the way. If you're gonna be a part of this and give money and supplies and food to the enemy, we're going to sink you. The idea behind all this is called neutrality. Not the first time America would want to remain neutral. Won't be the last. Woodrow Wilson is very big on this idea of neutrality. We will not join either side. Really, throughout his first term, Woodrow Wilson doesn't want to anger the voters. Because there are plenty of German Americans in the United States, immigrants from Germany, and they would very much not like a war against Germany. And then you have the Irish Americans who have come here to the United States, and they do not want a war to support Britain. The Irish do not have their independence from Britain yet. That actually happens during the war. So, Woodrow Wilson has two very large blocks that he doesn't want to upset. So yeah, he has very big interest in not going to war. He also has a lot of progressive ideas here, workers' rights, that stuff he's pushing. And if he goes to war, then you don't have the money to deal with that at home. You can't do both. Well, in May of 1915, we get the sinking of the ocean liner Lusitania. 128 Americans are on this ocean liner. That's a British ocean liner. And even though the Germans took out full-page ad in major newspapers saying, hey, Americans, don't go on the Atlantic, especially in British ships. There are German submarines and we will sink you. How well do Americans listen? Not well. And when these 128 Americans are killed, how do you think America responds? Not well. Everyone have down the Lusitania? So who remembers yellow journalism and how it brought us to the Spanish-American War? Tell me about yellow journalism. What is it? Clickbait. Clickbait is the best way to describe it in today's terms. So how did it lead us into the Spanish-American War? Yeah, these two newspapers in New York keep going back and forth on more and more clickbaity stories, getting the American people all riled up, and eventually we're just like, well, I guess we have to go to war. So when the Lusitania sank, Lusitania is sunk by a submarine, probably 1260 dead, twice torpedoed off Irish coast, sinks in 15 minutes. More than 1,400 lives believed lost with a torpedoed Lusitania. No war for the United States, but Germany to be shown injustice to mankind by the Lusitania horror. 1,502 lives are lost, 137 among the lost on Lusitania. Lusitania is thinking justifiable, Germany says in a statement, to 120 Americans among 1,272 dead. Lusitania is sunk by German submarine, 1,400 folk aboard. Oh, not folk. Lusitania dead, 1,256, 115 Americans. Germany officially recognizes that they sank this ship. Hundreds of lives are lost on the torpedoed Lusitania. And yet, America doesn't go to war. That's how strong our thought about neutrality was. We saw what was happening in Europe. We didn't want any part of it. So even though Lusitania might push some buttons, and the news is certainly happy to push those buttons further, we still stay out until this. Oh, yeah. In 1917, we get the Zimmermann telegram. Sometimes you'll see it called the Zimmermann note. Germany sends Mexico a telegram with an offer. If you, Mexico, get into a war with the U.S. and keep us distracted here so we don't go to war in Europe, then when the war's over, Mexico will make sure, or Germany will make sure Mexico gets Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. Lots of land back from what they lost in the Mexican-American War. Now, Mexico knows better. Mexico knows that's not going to go well. They fought that war. They lost. They realized that that's a bad idea. So, Mexico just ignores it. They don't say a word. But this telegram office is Western Union, and it happens to be that the Western Union main office is in London. So the British see this, and they go, America, you might want to see this. It blows up in the U.S. newspapers. Suddenly you have these people in Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. You have good old Texan boys, right? Don't mess with Texas. Well, previously they had no opinion on the war. That's Europe's war. You leave us alone. Now all of a sudden Germany's going to come and threaten me and my land, and they're going to take my land and give it back to Mexico? No, 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 no. Suddenly you gave a bunch of Americans who didn't care, you give them an opinion. This is what gets us into the war. So the Lusitanian unrestricted submarine warfare push, but it's not until we get the Zimmermann telegram do we bother to go. This is when it happens. And so we start getting propaganda trying to push Americans. This one here. So we have an older gent, gray hairs, got perhaps his grandchildren playing there, and he goes, Daddy, what did you do in the Great War? What's the message there? Yeah, they're going to be disappointed in him. I guess that would be probably his father, yeah. Looks older than that. But anyways. What did you do in the Great War? What's he going to tell him unless he went and fought? I was shoveling manure in Louisiana. You know, you don't have something honorable to say. This is where we get the Uncle Sam image. It's actually modeled off of a poster from Britain of Lord Kitchener, which, I mean, come on, look how British that is. Isn't that wonderful? But this, Uncle Sam has been a symbol in the U.S. since around the Civil War. This is where we get the Uncle Sam image. We also get this wonderful poster here. There's a lot to unpack. Let's take a look. What do you see in this poster? King Kong. King Kong is a what? A giant ape, a giant gorilla, yes. Okay, tell me about this thing. Is what? It could be, yeah, this is Lady Liberty. Good call, yes. What is happening to Lady Liberty? He's taking her, right? How would you describe this woman's expressions? In distress, yes. She clearly this is not going well for her. What else, Ben? Oh, you're deflecting. Gotcha. All right, so what else do we see in here? It says culture on this club. Tell me about the club. It's bloodied. So what do you think he's doing with that club of culture? He's beating German culture into it by force, right? What else do we see? What else can you describe? So as enlist in the U.S. Army, so destroy this mad brute, enlist in the U.S. Army. That's our direct message. What about what he's wearing? It's a German helmet. Yeah, you can't mistake that pickle helmet. It also says militarism on it if you can't see it. What do you think that means? They're taking everything by force. Very good. What about where he's coming from? How would you describe this scene behind him? It's all destroyed. It's all ruins. And you can see kind of faint here, it says America. So what's happening? They're coming over here. They're stepping their way across the Atlantic to us. So we have to step up and do something, or this mad brute comes to America to bash their culture into us and take liberty away from us. It's a great poster. There's a lot to it. We get bunches of posters like this. See if you can see what the theme to all of these is. Stand by the boys in the trenches, mine more coal. Little Americans, do your bit. Eat oatmeal, cornmeal mush, hominy, other corn cereals, and rice with milk. Save the wheat for our soldiers. Beat Germany. Support every flag that opposes Prussianism. Eat less of the food fighters need. Deny yourself something. Waste nothing. Or even, our boys need socks. Knit your bit. Send it over to the war. What's the message of all this? Help our troops how? By us sacrificing, sending them our stuff, right? That we sacrifice at home so the boys overseas can do better. So that they don't have to suffer as much. When war gets big enough, the home front helps. We haven't seen that in our lifetimes, that we have to sacrifice what's going on here at home. We've never had where, we can't buy, certain foods. We can't buy rubber. We have to sacrifice how much gasoline we can get. But when war gets big enough, that has to happen so that the military has enough to work with. Now, there's a song from this era that sums up all of this after the Zimmerman telegram. And it's one of my favorite patriotic songs that I think is thoroughly underrated. The lyrics are going to be at the bottom. I'm going to ask you about what you saw and what you heard at the end. Turn this up. So what's the message? Get ready, because we're coming. The Yanks are coming. Good old Yankees, right? Now, what do you think about the whole idea of over there? Or, go ahead. Germany. Hold on. Then hold that thought till the end of this thought. So over there means Germany. What do you think we're not talking about here anymore. America doesn't fight here. We're fighting wars far away. And I like to think of it like a parent saying, don't make me come back there. Don't make me come over there. And now that we are, America's going to play their bit. So the Selective Service Act, the draft, the thing that every man in here has to sign up for when he's 18, swells the Army from 120,000 to 5 million. Big Army. The government is going to take control of labor relations. Wartime does great things for workers and their rights because the government can't afford to have companies going on strike. We got a war to fight. We can't afford to have steel mills closing because they won't pay people. So the government just basically tells owners, fix it. I don't care what you do, fix it. The War Labor Board would be the main one to do that. The War Industries Board will decide what the economy is going to do. Basically, capitalism gets put on hold. Hey, you're going to make uniforms. You're going to make munitions. You're going to make tanks. You're making rifles. And everyone basically says, yes, sir, this is my job. My duty to the country. We also start rationing supplies. Railroads, you couldn't use them unless you needed them. You couldn't just like, I'm going on a vacation. Not allowed. We need those trains. Coal and oil, you better not be heating your homes too much because we need to send that stuff overseas. We need that to power our ships. And don't waste food. There were many instances where even if you had the money, you weren't allowed to buy it. We need it. In the end, taxes will skyrocket because of all of this. By summer of 1918, 1 million Americans are in France. This is a major shot in the arm for the people already there. Well, not only have Americans not spent 4 years in the trenches, we're fresh-faced and ready to go, being all America. But all these people who have spent the last 4 years in the trenches see all these bright young Americans and are like, oh, all right, now we have a shot. By November, 10,000 new American soldiers are coming over to Europe every single day. Go ahead, kill 10,000 of them. They'll be replaced tomorrow. Just basically drown them in Americans. The leader of this will be John Blackjack Pershing. And he is named General of the Armies. General of the Armies, meaning he's in charge of everyone. He would be equal to a 6-star general today because he is in charge of both the Army and the Navy in Europe. We do not have 6-star generals today. The highest you can go is 5. And that's only in war. That's right. There's also an obscure law in Congress that they made that's saying that George Washington is the highest ranking military officer always. So technically George is a 7-star general. Yeah, they promoted him posthumously. Yeah. George Washington will always be our highest ranking officer. Now the thing with Pershing is that when we came over, the British and French are like, great, we need someone here, we have missing units here, we've lost these guys, we need to replace them, let's just mix them all in, fill these gaps, take care of it. Pershing's like, no. We are the United States of America. We are our own command. We will not be fighting under British officers or French officers. We are Americans, we will fight under Americans. We choose our own destiny. Fun fact, they are converting Pershing Park, which is right next to the White House, into the National World War I Memorial. That will be happening over the next few years. I don't know if anyone has family in the Marines, but this is also where the U.S. Marines get the nickname Devil Dogs. Devil Dogs. Ask a Marine about the Devil Dogs. The Germans find the Marines so fearsome that they call them the Dogs of Hell. Teufelhunden. And the Marines are very happy to take this on as a nickname. American soldiers will be referred to as doughboys. There is no explanation for how this happened. No one knows. It just kind of did. I prefer the puns that we were there when they needed us, and we rose to the occasion. But otherwise, there's no good reason. Maybe we just looked well-fed compared to everyone else. That's what happens when you're not living in a trench. So seeing that America is now clearly in this war and will be throwing a lot into this war, Germany makes a last-ditch offensive. Take out Paris, knock out France before America can put too many people in Europe. Make it more difficult for us. Keep us out. But the U.S. Marines, they are first, are the get in the way. And that first action happens at Belleau Wood. And you should write that down. Belleau Wood. Let's take a look.
The outcome of the First World War now hung in the balance. The Germans had extended their front lines so much, they were now stretched very thinly along the length of the Western Front. And the Allies were finally starting to regroup. It was a critical point in the race against time.
That wood marked the tip of the German advance towards Paris. Control of it gave the Germans a key strategic foothold on the road to the French capital. If the Allies were to prevent Ludendorff from strutting down the Champs-Élysées, the German stronghold in Belleau Wood would have to be cleared.
That's the German commander. Shush! Yes, he was.
In the blazing heat of June the 6th, Allied troops prepared to start their advance on this wood. But these men weren't British or French. Instead, the task of clearing Belleau Wood had been given to the United States Marine Corps. For the first time in World War I, the Americans were going on the offensive. Even though it had been 14 months since the United States had declared war on Germany, this had not been long enough to master modern tactics. Now the US Marines prepared to retake Belleau Wood in the old-fashioned way, advancing line abreast. Over their heads, American guns laid a barrage of shells to soften up the German defenses. But the advancing Marines were in for a nasty shock. Hidden amongst the tightly packed trees, there were units of dogged German soldiers, veterans of the Russian front. They had the perfect cover for their machine gun nests and interlocking fields of fire. When the Marines got close enough, the Germans let rip. Some of the Marines fought their way through the machine gun fire and managed to establish a small foothold in this forest, but it cost them terrible casualties.
Five times the Marines made headway, 5 times they were beaten back. But on the 6th attempt, the Marines finally prized Belleau Wood away from the German grip. It had been a terrible cost. In their first encounter with the Germans, the US Marine Corps suffered 10,000 casualties. With the Allied victory at Belleau Wood, Ludendorff's path to Paris had been blocked. The Marines hadn't won the war, but they had helped save the Allies from defeat. More importantly, the Germans had come face to face with the Americans for the first time, and the doughboys had delivered a massive psychological blow to German morale. no one could now doubt that the Americans were in the war for real.
The U.S. Marine Corps would lose more people at Belleau Wood than they had lost in their entire history at that point. Bloody, but the Americans come out the victors. Germany has one final gamble. All-out attack in France. They know this is the beginning of the end. You can't keep up with 10,000 new Americans every single day. They end up pushing 30 miles. Again, consider that the Somme and Verdun had a total of 4 miles changing hands over the course of a year and a half. So this is actually significant. But at that point, it's too late. The Americans are already in Europe. It's the beginning of the end. In what's called the 100 Days Offensive, everyone makes the massive pushback. Italy is convinced to join the Allied side, and they take out Austria-Hungary. Britain, using soldiers from Australia and New Zealand, will occupy the Ottoman Empire, and they're knocked out of the war. The German Navy is sent to fight Britain alone, and they mutiny. They say, we're not doing it. It's a suicide mission. The Allies push back against the German main defensive line, and it's at that point the German High Command tells the Kaiser, it's over. In November of 1917, the Kaiser abdicates the throne. He gives up. He goes away. The Germans ask for an armistice, an end to the fighting. And on November 11th, the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, 1918, the fighting stops. What holiday do we celebrate November 11th? Every year. We don't celebrate Armistice Day. It's not Thanksgiving. No. It's a national holiday.
In the United States?
Yeah.
Do we have school off?
Not always. No. It's Veterans Day.
Oh, I said that.
Well, I didn't hear. For once, I didn't hear you. Sorry, Ben. I missed it. I guess I'm used to tuning you out. I'm sorry. Maybe. Yeah, the U.S. celebrates Veterans Day every November 11th. The British Empire celebrates Remembrance Day. The rest of the world celebrates Armistice Day. The whole world celebrates the end of the war. Right. Not what I was looking for. Shh. I get that train car will come up again. The symbol of the war is the poppy. It's one of the few flowers that will grow anywhere and grow very quickly. So in no man's land, which had been cratered and pockmarked and gassed and everything else, even after a few days, the poppies would start to bloom. A sign of life among all the death. And so it's the poppy that becomes the symbol of the war. Indeed, it's why I've had a poppy here all year. That's from the Canadian War Museum. The poppy is to remember that life goes on, that we hold on to something even though death is all around. And it's how we remember our veterans and how veterans are remembered around the world. Indeed, the fighting would stop at 11 a.m. on 11/11/18. The last to die for the war was Sergeant Henry Gunther. Died a minute before it ended. Now, a little foreshadowing in all this. Germany surrenders, they seek their armistice, before they had been pushed back into German territory. They hadn't been pushed all the way back into Germany. They had just been pushed back from behind their initial line of defenses. So most Germans don't know the big picture. Most Germans don't see their 10,000 Americans coming every single day. They don't see that the war is over. So some begin referring to the people who signed that armistice as the November criminals. because they had stabbed Germany in the back and given up before it was over. Some people, including one German courier, this guy. You might recognize him better from this photo. So, that is the end of this content for now. We have an activity on the Treaty of Versailles. Yes, you may go. I am passing out the study guide. Our test is going to be on Monday. It's a mini test, 25 questions, and a short essay.